The first time I noticed him, I didn't realize it mattered. It was late afternoon, the kind of light that softens everything without asking permission. I was watering the roses along the fence, something I do every day, not because they need it, but because I do. And he was there on the other side. New neighbor, young, focused, carrying boxes like the world hadn't taught him to rush yet. 27, I would learn later. He nodded. I nodded back. Polite, ordinary. What stayed with me wasn't his face. It was the pause, the fraction of a second longer than courtesy required. Not curiosity, not interest, recognition. I went inside and forgot about it, or so I told myself. Days passed, weeks. We crossed paths the way neighbors do. Mailbox timing, trash bins, shared weather complaints that say nothing and somehow feel like company. I never lingered and never needed to. Then one evening, my back door refused to close. It wasn't dramatic, just stubborn. Wood swollen from humidity, a latch that missed its mark unless I lifted it just right. I made a mental note to ask my husband. I didn't, because I already knew the answer. I'll get to it. He always did, eventually, just not while it mattered. Somewhere along the years, our conversations had learned how to land without impact. We spoke in familiar grooves, safe, predictable, untouching. That night, as I stood there adjusting the door with more patience than it deserved, I heard footsteps on the gravel. "You want a hand?" I turned. He was standing there, a respectful distance away, hands visible, voice neutral. No assumption, no urgency, just presence. "I'm fine," I said automatically. He nodded, already turning back, like he hadn't expected anything else. That's when I surprised myself. "Actually," I added, "if you don't mind." He smiled, not relieved, not eager, just ready. Inside, the house felt different with him in it. Not louder, not warmer, more deliberate. He examined the door quietly, fingers testing the hinge, eyes following the frame as if listening to something beneath the surface. "This won't take long," he said. I watched him work, not because it was fascinating, but because he didn't explain himself while he did it. He didn't perform. He didn't apologize for competence. It took less than 5 minutes. The door closed cleanly, solid, certain. I laughed, and the sound startled me. "I've been fighting with that thing for weeks," I said. He stepped back, wiping his hands. "Doors usually tell you when something's off." I don't know why I said it next. I hadn't planned to. It didn't feel rehearsed. "I asked my husband," I said lightly, "but he's useless with these things." The word landed between us, not sharp, honest. He didn't react the way people do when they hear something they're not supposed to. No judgment, no awkward correction. He just nodded. "Sometimes," he said, "people stop hearing requests once they think they're permanent." Permanent. That word stayed with me long after he left. That night, my husband noticed the door. "Did you fix this?" he asked. "No," I said. "The neighbor did." He paused, just a beat. "I was going to." I didn't answer, because for the first time, I wasn't interested in eventually. Over the next few weeks, nothing happened, which is important to understand. There were no texts, no visits, no accidental brush of hands. We exchanged nods across the driveway. That was all. And yet, something had shifted. Not between us, inside me. I started noticing how often people spoke at me instead of to me. How easily my words were absorbed without response. How quiet competence had felt louder than promises. Then one morning, I found a note tucked into my mailbox. Wrong address. I walked it over, knocked once. He answered, surprised. "Thanks," he said. "I appreciate that." He took the envelope, hesitated, then added, If you ever need anything, anything at all, you can ask. He didn't smile when he said it. The next time I saw him, it wasn't planned. That's important, because when moments are planned, they come with intention, with guardrails, with excuses already prepared. This one didn't. I was standing at the sink, watching the late afternoon light stretch across the counter, when I noticed movement outside. His truck, pulling in slower than usual, engine cutting off, silence afterward. I didn't rush. I didn't look right away. I finished drying my hands, straightened the towel, took a breath I didn't need. When I stepped onto the porch, he was already there, checking something in the bed of his truck, sleeves rolled up, focused. The same quiet focus I'd noticed the first time. The kind that makes you feel like you're interrupting something important just by existing nearby. "Hey," he said when he saw me. Simple, unforced. "Hi," I replied. A pause followed, not awkward, evaluative, like two people deciding whether to keep things ordinary or let them become something else. "How's the door?" he asked. "Still behaving," I said. I didn't realize how much tension it was holding until it wasn't. He smiled at that, not wide, not flirtatious, almost thoughtful. Funny how that works. I leaned against the railing, the wood cool under my palms. From where I stood, I could see into my kitchen, into the life I'd built piece by piece, the life that looked complete from the outside. "You've lived here a long time," he said, glancing toward my house. "Yes," I answered. "Long enough for things to stop changing unless I insist." He looked at me then, really looked, not scanning, not measuring, listening. That's when I felt it. Not attraction, alignment. It's a dangerous thing when someone hears what you mean instead of what you say. "I should let you get on with your day," I added, stepping back slightly. He nodded but didn't move right away. "If you ever need help again," he said, "I don't mind." The way he said it mattered. No implication, no expectation, just availability. Availability is rare when you're my age. Most people assume you've already chosen what you'll tolerate. That night, my husband talked about retirement plans, numbers, timelines, places we might move someday. He spoke like the future was a formality, something already agreed upon. I listened, I always do, but something inside me was cataloging the conversation differently, not for content, but for absence. He didn't ask how my day had felt, didn't notice the way I paused before answering, didn't hear the silence between my words. Later, when he fell asleep, I stood at the bedroom door again, opened it, closed it, smooth, certain. I rested my hand on the frame longer than necessary. The next week passed quietly, too quietly. No sightings, no notes, no chance encounters. And I told myself that was good, that this was what restraint looked like, what maturity sounded like. Then, on a morning I hadn't slept well, I heard the knock. Not loud, not hesitant, confident. I opened the door without checking who it was. He stood there holding a small toolbox. "I was fixing something for my wife," he said, almost apologetically. "Thought I'd see if you needed anything before I put this away." I could have said no. I could have smiled, thanked him, and closed the door. Instead, I stepped aside. "Actually," I said, "there's something else that's been sticking." His eyes flicked past me into the house, then back to my face. "All right," he said, "show me." And as he stepped inside, I realized this moment felt different from the first. Not because of what was happening, but because of what I wasn't saying anymore. It wasn't another door. Not really. I led him down the hallway slowly, aware of every step, every sound the house made, as if it were registering what was about to change. The air felt thicker than before, like it had learned something it couldn't unlearn. "It's this way," I said, stopping near the end of the hall. He waited, didn't pass me, didn't rush ahead. That mattered more than it should have. I gestured toward a cabinet door near the laundry nook. Small, ordinary, the kind of thing no one would notice unless they lived with it every day. "It sticks sometimes," I said, "only when you pull it just right." He crouched down, inspected the hinge, tested it once, twice. Quiet, focused, the same deliberate calm. As he worked, I leaned against the wall behind him, folding my arms loosely. I could see the back of his neck, the way his shoulders moved when he applied pressure. Nothing dramatic, nothing suggestive, and yet my thoughts slowed. That's what happens when someone brings presence into a space that's been running on autopilot. "You've taken good care of this place," he said, almost casually. I smiled. Someone had to. He glanced back at me then, just briefly. Not curiosity, recognition again. "I didn't mean that the way it sounded," I added. "My husband, he provides. He just doesn't notice details." He nodded. "Details are where people hide." That sentence landed differently than it should have. He finished quickly, stood up, tested the cabinet. Smooth. "All set," he said. I thanked him, again, but this time neither of us moved right away. The silence wasn't empty. It felt held, like both of us were waiting for something to declare itself. "I should go," he said finally. "Yes," I replied, "you should." He didn't move. Instead, he looked down the hallway, toward the bedroom, the same door. "Everything else okay?" he asked, gently. It wasn't a casual question. I felt it in the way he said, "okay." I could have lied, given the practiced answer, the one that keeps things neat. Instead, I said, "I don't know." He didn't fill the space after that, didn't offer advice, didn't reassure me. He just listened. Listening does something dangerous when you've gone too long without it. "I don't feel seen anymore," I said quietly. "Not as a woman, not as anything that changes." He met my eyes. No shock, no discomfort. "Being seen isn't about age," he said. "It's about attention." I laughed softly. "You're very sure of yourself for someone so young." He smiled then, small, controlled. "You'd be surprised what certainty comes from knowing when not to speak." That was the moment I felt the balance shift, not toward desire, toward possibility. He stepped back, creating distance on purpose, another thing that mattered. "I'll see you around," he said. "Yes," I replied. "I'm sure you will." He left without another word. That night, my husband asked me what I'd done that day. "Not much," I said. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the truth either, because what I didn't say was that something had been opened, not a door, a question. And questions don't close the way doors do. They wait. After that, I became aware of time in a way I hadn't been for years. Not the big markers, birthdays, anniversaries, holidays, but the small ones, the pauses, the in-betweens, the moments where something could happen, even if it didn't. I started waking up earlier, not because I needed to, but because lying still felt like waiting. I'd stand at the window with my coffee and watch the neighborhood come alive. Cars leaving, dogs being walked, lives moving forward. Sometimes I saw him, sometimes I didn't. And on the days I didn't, I noticed the absence more than I wanted to admit. My husband sensed something before he understood it. He always did. He'd ask questions that circled without landing. You okay? You seem distracted. Everything all right? I answered the way long marriages teach you to answer. Calm, reassuring, efficient. Yes, just tired. Nothing to worry about. The thing about those answers is they work until they don't. One afternoon, I found myself reorganizing the hall closet. Not because it needed it, but because my hands needed something to do. I was halfway through a box of old coats when I heard voices outside. His voice and his wife's. They were laughing, easy, familiar. The sound drifted through the open window and settled in the room like a reminder. I stopped what I was doing. I didn't feel jealous. I felt aware. Aware that he belonged to a life I wasn't part of. A life with its own rhythms, its own expectations. A life that, just like mine, looked complete from the outside. That night, I dreamed of doors again. Not opening, not closing, just standing there, waiting. A few days later, I ran into him at the mailbox. Close enough this time that politeness felt unnecessary. Morning, he said. Morning. He handed me a piece of mail that had landed in his box by mistake. Our fingers touched, briefly, incidentally. Neither of us reacted, but something in the air shifted anyway. Everything all right? He asked. The question was simple. The meaning wasn't. Yes, I said. This time, the lie didn't sit as easily. He nodded, like he heard the hesitation even if he didn't challenge it. If you ever want to talk, he said, careful with his words, I'm around. Around, not available, not waiting, just present. That night, my husband went to bed early. I stayed up, the house quiet around me, the television on but muted. I wasn't watching it. I was thinking about certainty, about how people assume certainty comes with age, about how wrong that assumption is. Because the older you get, the more you understand what's at stake, the more weight every decision carries, the more you realize that sometimes the most dangerous thing isn't desire, it's being reminded of who you still are. I stood in the hallway again, the familiar spot, the door frame cool under my fingers. And for the first time, I didn't close the door. I left it open. Not wide, just enough. And as I turned off the light, one thought followed me into the dark. Quiet, persistent, unresolved. I didn't know what I wanted to do next, but I knew something was about to ask me to choose. The knock came the next evening. Not loud, not tentative. The same calm rhythm as before. I stood in the kitchen longer than I needed to, my hands resting on the counter, listening to the sound settle into the house. My husband was in the living room, absorbed in something on his phone, the television murmuring to no one in particular. I didn't announce myself when I opened the door. He was there, standing a little farther back this time, like he was giving me space before I'd even asked for it. I hope this isn't a bad time, he said. It depends, I replied. On what? I didn't say. He glanced past me, just briefly, toward the living room, toward the life that was supposed to explain everything. "I won't stay long," he added. That was the moment I noticed what he wasn't carrying. No toolbox, no envelope, no excuse. "Come in," I said. The word surprised me with how easily it left my mouth. He stepped inside, and again the house adjusted around him. It wasn't imagination. Some spaces respond when intention enters them. They quiet down. They wait. "I wanted to check on you," he said. "You seemed unsettled the other day." Unsettled. I smiled faintly. That's one word for it. We stood there, neither of us moving deeper into the house, as if crossing that invisible line would make things real in a way neither of us was ready to name. "I don't want to cause trouble," he said carefully. "I know," I replied. And I did. That's what made it dangerous. "My wife thinks I'm helping you with house stuff," he continued. "She likes knowing I'm useful." I felt something tighten in my chest at that. "So does mine," I said. He looked at me then, and this time there was no polite distance in his eyes, no neighborly buffer, just understanding. "I don't think either of us is doing anything wrong," he said, "but I think we're getting close to something that doesn't stay harmless forever." The way he said forever mattered. I leaned against the wall, suddenly aware of my breathing, of the way the house held sound, of how quiet my husband had become in the other room. "What do you think this is?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. "I think," he said slowly, "it's two people who weren't looking, realizing they've been seen." The words settled between us. I stepped closer, not touching, just closing the space enough to feel the warmth of another presence. "And what do people usually do when that happens?" I asked. His voice dropped. "They either step back or they step forward." Neither of us moved. Somewhere behind me, a floorboard creaked, the sound of a life continuing on schedule. I turned my head slightly, listening. When I looked back at him, his expression hadn't changed, but something in his posture had. Straighter, more deliberate. "I should go," he said. "Yes," I replied. Again, neither of us moved. He reached for the door this time. His hand hovered there for a second longer than necessary. Before opening it, he said, "If I don't leave now, the choice won't be subtle anymore." I nodded. "I know." He opened the door. Then he stopped. Without turning around, he added, "Whatever you decide, it won't be because you're lonely. It'll be because you finally remembered yourself." The door closed softly behind him. I didn't move, not for a long time, because for the first time, the question wasn't whether something could happen. It was how long I could pretend I hadn't already started answering it. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was restless, but because my mind refused to settle on one version of the truth. My husband slept beside me, familiar and steady, his breathing a rhythm I'd memorized years ago. I lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying the evening over and over, not changing what was said, just noticing what wasn't. No promises, no confessions, no lines crossed. And yet, something had shifted again. The next morning felt strangely ordinary. Coffee, toast, the paper folded the same way it always was. My husband talked about errands, about a repair he'd finally get around to this weekend. I nodded, smiled, listened. I wondered if he noticed how carefully I was listening now. Later, as I rinsed my mug, I caught my reflection in the window. The same face I'd seen for years, lines earned honestly, eyes that had learned when to hold back. But there was something else there now. Not youth, not recklessness, awareness. Around midday, I stepped outside to check the mail. The air was warmer than it had been, the kind of warmth that makes you feel time passing even when you stand still. He was across the street, loading something into his truck. We didn't wave. We didn't need to. He glanced up briefly, met my eyes, then looked away, not dismissively, but deliberately, as if we'd silently agreed to pause something that had begun to move on its own. I told myself that was good, that restraint was the right answer, that nothing had been lost. But later that afternoon, I found myself standing in the hallway again. The door was still open. I closed it this time, slowly, carefully, listening to the sound it made when it met the frame. Perfect. That evening, my husband asked me if I wanted to take a short trip, just the two of us, somewhere quiet, somewhere familiar. Soon, he said, before things get too busy. I said yes, I meant it. But even as I did, a thought surfaced, uninvited, unfinished. I wondered what would happen if I didn't keep choosing soon over now. That night, as I turned off the light, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. A single message, no name attached, just a sentence. If you ever want to talk, really talk, I'll listen. I didn't open it right away. I didn't delete it either. I set the phone face down and lay there in the dark, listening to the house breathe, knowing that whatever came next wouldn't announce itself loudly. It would arrive quietly, the way it always does, right before you decide whether to answer. I didn't reply, not that night. I left the phone where it was, face down, like that somehow made the choice neutral, like silence was a decision that didn't count. But silence is never empty. It just delays sound. The next few days unfolded with a precision that felt intentional, even though no one had planned it that way. My husband followed through on small things, took out the trash before I asked, fixed a loose handle in the bathroom, mentioned the trip again, even looked up dates. I noticed all of it. That was the strange part. When you're finally seen by someone else, you start seeing everyone more clearly, including the people you've been making excuses for. I kept expecting another knock. It didn't come. Instead, there were moments, glances, timing that felt slightly off. I'd step outside just as he was leaving. He'd pull in just as I was closing the door, close enough to confirm awareness, far enough to maintain distance. One afternoon, I found myself standing at the edge of my driveway, watching him walk back toward his house. His wife called his name from inside. He turned, smiled, disappeared through the doorway. I felt something tighten, not jealousy, recognition. That evening, I cooked dinner slowly, deliberately. I set the table even though we rarely bothered anymore. My husband noticed. "You're quiet," he said. "I'm thinking," I replied. "About what?" I almost told him, almost said the thing that had been sitting behind my teeth for weeks, the thing that would have changed the temperature of the room instantly. Instead, I said, "About how long we've known each other." He smiled. "A long time." "Yes," I said, "a very long time." Later, when he fell asleep, I picked up my phone again. The message was still there, waiting, unchanged. I typed a response, deleted it, typed another, paused. What stopped me wasn't fear of being caught. It wasn't guilt. It was the understanding that once I answered, the shape of things would change, even if nothing else did. I stood up and walked to the hallway. The door was closed. I rested my hand against it, feeling the solidness beneath my palm, the certainty, the finality. And for the first time since all this began, I wondered something I hadn't let myself consider yet. What if the moment wasn't asking me whether I would cross a line, but whether I would finally admit that the line had already moved? I went back to bed without answering the message, but I didn't turn the phone off. And somewhere between the dark and sleep, I realized something else. Whatever happened next wouldn't start with a knock. It would start with a reply. And I hadn't decided yet whether I wanted to send it. The next morning, I woke before the alarm. That never happens anymore. The house was quiet in that early suspended way, before decisions are made, before the day starts pretending it knows where it's going. I lay there for a moment, listening to my husband breathe, steady and untroubled, like nothing in the world was shifting inches away from him. I reached for my phone. The screen lit up instantly. No new messages. I told myself that was relief. But it didn't feel like relief. It felt like pressure building behind something thin. Over breakfast, my husband talked about the trip again. Same place we'd been before. Same hotel, same view. He spoke with confidence, like familiarity was proof of safety. Next month, he said. We deserve it. I nodded, smiled, even agreed. And all the while, a single thought kept repeating. Not loud, not urgent, just persistent. Next month is a long time. Later that day, I heard voices outside. Laughter, movement, the sound of a life unfolding in real time. I stood at the window longer than necessary and watched him cross the yard, his phone pressed to his ear, expression relaxed in a way that suggested he wasn't waiting for anything. That should have settled me. It didn't. That evening, as the light faded and the house slipped back into its familiar rhythm, my phone buzzed again. This time, I didn't turn it face down. One new message. I won't ask again, but I wanted you to know I meant what I said. I read it once, then again. No pressure, no urgency, no explanation. Just presence. I set the phone on the table and walked into the hallway. The same hallway, the same door. I opened it, closed it, let the sound anchor me the way it always had. Smooth, certain. But certainty can be deceptive, because as I stood there, something became uncomfortably clear. This wasn't about temptation. It wasn't even about him. It was about whether I was willing to keep living inside decisions that had been made years ago, without ever checking if they still fit. I went back to the living room and sat down, picked up my phone, typed 3 words. I didn't send them. Not yet. Outside, somewhere across the street, a door opened, then closed. And for reasons I couldn't explain, I knew the next sound I was waiting for wouldn't come from outside the house. It would come from my phone. And when it did, everything would finally have to move. I didn't send the message that night. I set the phone down and sat there in the quiet, letting the weight of the choice settle without rushing it away. That's something age teaches you. How to sit with things long enough to hear what they're really asking. My husband came in a little later, talking about nothing important, the kind of conversation that fills space without touching it. I listened, answered when it was expected, smiled when it made sense. He kissed my forehead before bed, a familiar gesture, comfortable, automatic. I lay awake after he fell asleep, staring at the dark, thinking about how many decisions in my life had started out temporary and quietly become permanent. How often later had turned into never without anyone agreeing to it out loud. Across the street, a porch light flicked on, then off. I picked up my phone again. The 3 words were still there, unsent. Simple, harmless on their own, dangerous only because of what they could become. I realized then that this wasn't a crossroads the way people imagine crossroads. No dramatic fork in the road, no clear right or wrong. It was smaller than that, quieter. Just a moment where doing nothing was also a decision, and not a neutral one. I locked the phone and placed it face down on the nightstand, not because I'd decided no, but because I hadn't decided yes. Yet. And as I closed my eyes, one thought stayed with me, steady and unresolved, like a door left just slightly open. The hardest part wasn't choosing between my husband and my neighbor. It was choosing whether I was finally ready to choose myself. And I knew, whatever happened next would begin the moment I stopped pretending the decision wasn't already waiting.